President Putin's war against Ukraine has shattered peace in Europe and has created the biggest security crisis in Europe since the Second World War. NATO has responded with strength and unity, and President Zelensky's leadership and courage are an inspiration to all of us. I am pleased that he could join our meeting today. President Zelensky made clear that Ukraine relies on our continued support, and our message to him was equally clear. Ukraine can count on us for as long as it takes. Allies will continue to provide major military and financial help, and today leaders agreed to strengthen our support by agreeing a comprehensive assistance package for Ukraine. This includes secure communications, fuel, medical supplies and body armor, equipment to counter mines and chemical and biological threats, and hundreds of portable anti-drone systems. Over the longer term, we will help Ukraine transition from Soviet-era equipment to modern NATO equipment, boost interoperability, and further strengthen its defense and security institutions. All of this shows our commitment to Ukraine's future and that our commitment is unshakable. A strong, independent Ukraine is vital for the stability of the Euro-Atlantic area. Today, at the summit, NATO leaders decided a fundamental shift in our defense and deterrence to respond to a new security reality. We will strengthen our forward defenses. We will enhance our battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance up to brigade levels. We will transform the NATO response force and increase the number of high readiness forces to well over 300,000. We will also boost our ability to reinforce, including with more pre-positioned equipment and stockpiles of military supplies, more forward-deployed capabilities like air defense, strengthened command and control, and upgraded defense plans with forces pre-assigned to defend specific allies. This is the first time since the Cold War that we have these kind of plans with pre-assigned forces. They will work with home defense forces and become familiar with local terrain, facilities and pre-positioned stocks, so that we can reinforce even faster. Doing more will cost more. Today, allies recommitted to the pledge we made in 2014 to spend at least 2% of GDP on defense. Since 2014, European allies and Canada have spent an extra 350 billion US.
No me consta, pero probablemente le habrá sorprendido la fuerza de nuestra unidad, la rapidez de nuestra respuesta a la nueva.
And an additional 5 have concrete commitments to meet it thereafter. 2% is increasingly seen as a floor, not as a ceiling. Allies are also investing more in modern capabilities, contributing more to NATO deployments and exercises, and we have agreed to increase NATO's common funding to finance the facilities we need for reinforcement, as well as more training and more exercises, command and control, and engagement with partners. We face a radical change to our security environment, and strategic competition is rising around the world. So today, leaders have endorsed NATO's new strategic concept, And it is published as we speak. And this is the new strategic concept. The current one was agreed in 2010, and this is very different compared to what we agreed back then. It makes clear that Russia poses the most significant and direct threat to our security. In the current concept, we state that Russia is a strategic partner. In the current concept, we do not mention China with a single word. In this, allies states that China's coercive policies challenge our interests, security, and values. The concept also sets out our joint position on countering terrorism, as well as cyber and hybrid threats. Today, we took other important steps to continue our adaptation. We are launching the NATO Innovation Fund. Backed by allies, it will invest 1 billion euros in startups and funds developing dual-use emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence. Together with NATO's Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, or DIANA, the new fund will harness the best new technology for transatlantic security. Climate change is a defining challenge of our time, and NATO is committed to playing our part in mitigating the impact on our security. Today, we agreed a new methodology to map military greenhouse gas emissions, and we agreed concrete targets to cut NATO emissions. Our aim is to cut emissions by NATO bodies and commands by at least 45% by 2030 and move towards net zero by 2050. This is an important step for our alliance. We cannot choose between having green militaries or strong militaries. They must be both. So we must maintain our operational effectiveness and readiness as we continue to adapt. In a more dangerous and competitive world, we must work even more closely with like-minded nations and organizations. This afternoon, our Indo-Pacific partners, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea, will take part in a NATO summit for the first time. We will also be joined by the European Union, Finland, Georgia, and Sweden. Today, NATO leaders took the historic decision to invite Finland and Sweden to become members of NATO. The agreement concluded last night by Turkey, Finland, and Sweden paved the way for this decision. I would like to thank Turkey, Finland, and Sweden for accepting my invitation to engage in negotiations to find a united way forward. This has been hard work over many weeks, with multiple contacts at many different levels. Senior officials have had 2 rounds of talks in Brussels under my auspices. And last night we met President Erdogan, President Niinistö, and Prime Minister Andersson, and we were able to reach the final agreement. This is a good agreement for Turkey. It is a good agreement for Finland and Sweden, and it is a good agreement for NATO. And with that, I'm ready to take your questions.
Okay, we'll start with CNN.
Thank you so much. So I have 2 questions. The first is, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about the meetings you've had over the day about ironing out the details of the new force model, and that includes the question of permanent basing. And I'm wondering, Putin has said that Finland and Sweden's membership bids don't pose a direct threat to Russia, but he has also warned them about becoming bases for NATO forces or equipment. So I'm wondering whether NATO has any plans to put permanent bases in those countries now that they've been formally invited into the alliance?
First of all, the decision to invite Finland and Sweden to become members demonstrates that NATO's door is open. It demonstrates that President Putin did not succeed in closing NATO's door. NATO's door remains open. And it also demonstrates that we respect the sovereign right of every nation to choose their own path. So we, of course, respected Finland and Sweden when they decided to stay out of NATO for many, many years. But then we also welcome them and respect their decision to join NATO. NATO allies have already stepped up, and NATO has increased its presence in the Baltic Nordic region. And of course, when they become members, we can do even more together. What we will make sure with our presence is that we are able to defend all allies, including, of course, Finland and Sweden. And this links to the first part of your question. When it comes to this fundamental shift in our deterrence and defense, this is about air, sea, land, cyber. But when we speak about land, that entails or is composed of three main elements. Partly more forward presence. We will enhance, reinforce the battle groups we have already deployed up to brigade levels. So that's more presence, especially in the eastern part of the alliance. The second element is more pre-positioned equipment. We know that actually to move people can go quite fast, but to move heavy equipment, battle tanks, ammunition, fuel, all kinds of supplies, that take time. So if you have that pre-positioned in place, then you can move in very quickly with the personnel. So the second element on top of the increased presence will be more pre-positioned equipment. And then on top of that, we will have for the first time since the Cold War, pre-assigned forces in, of course, their home countries, but these forces will then rotate in and out. They will train, they will learn how to operate together with the home forces, for instance, in the Baltic countries or in Poland or other places in the alliance. They will be familiar with the terrain, with the pre-positioned equipment. And for instance, one example of this is what Germany just has announced, that they are now pre-assigning, designating a specific brigade in Germany that will train and, of course, work together with the already German battle group in Lithuania and with more pre-positioned equipment. Then this German brigade has a specific responsibility and I would say advantages because they have trained there and know the country to reinforce and support Lithuania if needed. So these are the three elements. You can also look at the NATO homepage. You can see more details there in the fact sheet. And then, of course, the announcement by different allies today makes it, also is actually giving substance to the decisions that allies made today.
Interfax Ukraine.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, Interfax Ukraine. Happy birthday, Oana. And thank you from all of my colleagues for everything you are doing for us. Sorry, Secretary General. Question for you. Coming back to President Zelensky's address, what kind of reaction was from leaders in the room? Can you give a little bit more on this? What will be the main message to Ukrainian people? Do you think it will be possible for Ukraine then, when this war will be over, to join NATO like Sweden and Finland without membership action plan? Thank you.
Well, the message from the leaders in the meeting and in the room was a very strong expression of support. And not only expression of support, but actually they announced additional systems, weapons, equipment that allies, NATO allies, are now delivering to Ukraine. Germany made announcements, Norway made announcements, and other countries made announcements for additional support, military support to Ukraine. The Netherlands also made announcements on more heavy weapons to Ukraine. So part of this is something we do. It's also as a message in deeds, but also in words, but also in deeds. but I think also it's very clear that allies are prepared for long haul. Wars are unpredictable, but we have to be prepared for the long haul, and that was also the clear message to all of us in the room from President Zelensky, and our answer was yes, we are prepared. Because they are fighting for their independence, but they're also fighting for values which are important for NATO, fundamental for NATO. The sovereignty, the territorial integrity of every nation, and therefore this matters for our security. Our focus now is to support Ukraine. This war will, as most other wars, at some stage end at the negotiating table. But it is important that Ukraine is able to get an agreement on their terms, which is acceptable for Ukraine. And therefore we know that there is a very close link between what they can achieve around the negotiating table and their strength on the battlefield, and therefore our focus now is to support them on the battlefield with many different types of lethal and non-lethal support. That is the focus, and then of course we have demonstrated today that NATO's door remains open, and we also reiterate the decision we made in Bucharest on membership for Ukraine.
Spanish television.
Mr. Secretary General, welcome to Madrid. You don't have a crystal ball, but I was wondering, how much longer do you think it's going to take for Finland and Sweden to join the NATO, since it's a pretty urgent situation? Thank you very much.
Well, so far this is the fastest accession protocol ever, accession process ever, because Finland and Sweden applied for membership in May, and now at the end of June, leaders invite them to become members, and we will sign the accession protocol, and then what remains, of course, is the ratification in 30 parliaments. I cannot speak on behalf or promise anything on behalf of 30 different parliaments, but the message in the room is that throughout the alliance there is a strong will to work with parliaments so they can do the ratification as soon as possible. So this has moved fast so far, and of course I expect that the allies are ready to also ratify as soon as possible, but there are different procedures in different countries, so this will take some time in different parliaments.
Global News Canada.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. David Aiken, Global News. You were very gracious greeting the Canadian Prime Minister today. Secretaries General before you have been very gracious greeting Canadian Prime Ministers, but our spending is just awful. It decreased, if you measure by GDP, it decreased in absolute terms. We're nowhere near the 2%. It's not your place, but I wonder, how might you convince a Canadian public, a Canadian politician, to spend more on defense? And secondarily, what then might a medium or smaller military power do, contribute, with some of this new focus, new spheres of influence in China, in Asia, as well as the urgent crisis here in Europe? Thank you.
Of course, I expect all allies to meet the guidelines we have set, and we agreed them back in 2014 for the decade up to 2024, and since then the world has just become more dangerous. And I have been a politician myself for many years, and I understand that it's always easier to invest in health, in education and infrastructure instead of allocating money for defense. That's very easy to understand. And that's also the reason why NATO allies reduced defense spending after the end of the Cold War. But if we reduce defense spending when tensions are going down, we have to be able to increase defense spending when tensions are going up and when we live in a more dangerous world. And therefore I welcome the fact that all NATO allies have increased defense spending and added a lot. Not all allies have plans in place to be at 2% by 2024, but the vast majority have such plans, and more allies are actually meeting the 2% target or are very close. So, of course, this is a message to all allies, including Canada. At the same time, also welcome the fact that Canada and other allies are providing a lot of capabilities, contributions to NATO missions and operations, and Canada lead the battle group in Latvia. I've been there together with Prime Minister Trudeau, and also with the defense and the foreign minister, and also welcome the fact that Canada is not stepping up its presence in Latvia, and of course this also counts a lot when it comes to contributions to our collective defense.
Thank you. That's, I'm afraid, all that we have time for. Secretary General needs to meet our Indo-Pacific partners. Secretary General.
Thank you so much.